There we go. Welcome. This is a little different for us, not just a lecture. We're going to have some activity to follow along with. So I'm Victor Curran. Welcome on behalf of the Transcendentalism Council of First Parish in Concord. Our group, for about 15 years now, have been putting on programs that educate and celebrate about the history of Concord and the great thinkers and writers that are associated with this town and with this parish. And we're very excited today to have Ellen Whitney, who is a longtime member of First Parish, leader of the Flower Committee here for over 10 years. And she is passionate about the intersection of art and nature and finding opportunities for joy. And sensory delight, spiritual grounding, all in floral design. She's the designer of the Little Women Garden at Orchard House, the Native Plant Garden at the Cambridge School of Weston in 2020 and 2021, when you may recall people weren't able to do so many things in person. She wrote and hosted 3 5-part series of videos for the Concord Museum Garden Tours and Holiday House Tours. She's a longtime member of the Thoreau Society and, of course, here at First Parish in Concord. So we want to welcome Ellen. You're going to do some Q&A at the end?
I will.
All right, and then there's
a tea after.
There's something special going on. Now, what's going on downstairs?
Well, Tim has set up a nice tea for everybody down in Parish Hall.
All right, and to get to the Parish Hall, go through this door. If you're using the stairs, you just go straight down the stairs, make a hairpin right, and that'll take you to the Parish Hall. If you are using the elevator, turn right immediately after you go through this door, and that'll take you to the elevator. Welcome, and welcome, Ellen.
Well, thank you, Victor. And thank you, everybody. I'm really just touched to see everyone who is here. There's so many people from different parts of my flower life, from the beginning, from my time in Concord, time here at the Flower Committee at First Parish, times way back when I first started gardening on Summer Street in Watertown. And it's just wonderful. I'm touched to see everyone who showed up for this. Yes, so please do. I'd love to visit with you, so please do come to the tea that Tim's made downstairs after. I'm going to talk, the reason I think I'm grateful for the Transcendentalist Council to have done this, because it really helped me to gather things that I've been thinking about for the last 15 or 20 years while I've been flower arranging. I say a Thoreauvian, a Transcendentalist. It's from way back. My father was a lifelong member of the Thoreau Society when he was in his 20s, right after World War II, and he was just casting about. His mother gave him a lifetime membership. That was sort of her way of like, this may help you with thinking about your life. And it did, and it sort of trickled down to me. And gardening, too, really wasn't part of my life until that Summer Street garden 30 years ago. But my mother and my grandmother had gardened and were flower arrangers on their own right. So this has been a part of me for a long time. The Transcendentalist part of it, I think, came upon me more when I was living here, and I will be starting this presentation by going through some principles that Henry Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson laid out that apply to all of our lives, but very much apply to flower arranging the way I do it too. So we'll do that, and then we'll go through flowers through the year, month by month, and kind of what influences I'm picking up from nature, and I'll be showing you how to do that, whether you are thinking about it as a flower arranger, whether you are someone who is just out in nature, in the woods or in a garden, you can apply these principles there. Or if you're looking at a flower arrangement, it'll help you, I think, see more deeply and have a deeper experience with it. Because I think that's what I'm looking for myself, and maybe for you too, is to use this beauty and nature and the energy that's created when those are together, to have a transcendent experience, to sink deeper into your moment, recognize where you are, look at the details, and there find the spirit, God, cosmic energy. We are in a Unitarian meeting house, so call it what you will, substitute what you will. When I say energy, I mean all of those things. Okay, so next slide, Arkady. So here we go. So Henry Thoreau, and this is probably, of all the quotes I'm sharing with you, the one I think about the most every day, really. My profession is always to be on the alert to find God in nature, to know his lurking places. So I just love the way that was put, and to really, so that reminds me to look very closely at nature, at everything really, and see really what it is. Not just what I think it is, but look at it so closely that I have a direct experience with it. To know his lurking places, I like that feeling of you are uncovering something, you are interacting with it, you're like looking underneath, you're looking very closely. And then when you find it, you get this magical feeling, I think, as you would when you discover someone lurking. It's like a child's game or something. You are finding something, and there is excitement around that, for me, anyway. Okay. Next slide. So don't worry if you can't read that print. I'll be reading it to you also. So what you want to do is, I was saying, look very closely. What are the colors, textures, the atmosphere of your surroundings? So those photographs, I should say, all these photographs are ones that I've taken, and without just a couple exceptions, all of these are my flower arrangements, and I'll point out the ones that aren't. So I find this quite exciting, to go out and look at a garden or nature and like, what is it that defines this time? There are these sort of mauves in this one, and the yellow, soft yellows, and then, gosh, part of it is this, that the trees aren't leafed out yet. You're seeing a lot of bark, a lot of sticks, and that the atmosphere feels sort of moist there. The sky is not a bright blue yet. And then to the right of that is a flower arrangement, a detail, and then more of a full shot. And you can see how I picked up those colors, mostly with things that I've been able to find in this area. The daffodils were blooming already. That's a hellebore. Those are holly leaves. The leaves hadn't leafed out yet, but you can find leaves, at all times you can always find an evergreen leaf. And it really, I felt like with the hellebore, there's some hellebore leaves there too, you didn't want a spring leaf quite yet. I mean, this is a late April arrangement. So it just didn't feel quite right to me. You'll also see there are a lot of sticks, there are a lot of stems. So you're looking at the details in the natural scene and pulling those out. A glass container. So I never use a glass container in the fall. It's not a wet time of year, and glass there's such a sheen to it. You see all the water. I use a lot of glass in the winter for ice in the spring, because you're just always dealing with either you're seeing moisture or you're working with flowers that are just full of moisture. I want to point out, below the daffodils, you'll see Andromeda. You see that sort of draping Andromeda. That is a great, great plant to utilize starting now, right through the spring. And I was out the other day, and it has a beautiful stem on it right now, sort of that just sort of red-purple. And those very hard to berries will plump up. And Andromeda was actually Thoreau's favorite plant. I think our ubiquitous suburban plant is like a distant cousin from that Andromeda, but it's a wonderful counterpoint to use and has those little berry forms. Next slide. So change your perspective. That's another great thing to do so that you can see things differently. You know, I think it was in the holiday house tour videos that I lay under the Christmas tree. Well, that's how you can, a vehicle for you to see things afresh. You know, look at them very, very closely, but also we're not used to looking up. You know, just you'll see something fresh and different, and that's what you're looking for. You know, also, when you're changing your perspective and when you're getting into an environment, use all your senses, not just your eyes. Like, really touch the flowers. Get down and touch the ground. Feel what is the temperature of the ground. You might even lie down on the ground, look up at bushes, feel the texture of the grass, but, you know, touch those flowers. Because then you'll know, is it slick? You know, what are you bringing into your arrangement? Because it might not be exactly that same slick flower, but you want to get that feeling of slickness into your arrangement if that's what's in the atmosphere. Next slide. Okay, Thoreau also said, each season is an infinitesimal point. It no sooner comes than it is gone. It has no duration. So in flower arranging, what you're doing is you are trying to arrest that point and hold it for a moment, which is almost impossible, but you can try to do that in flower arranging. And what I have up there, like this, I showed the skunk cabbage, I think for a couple of reasons. One is I am really looking forward to skunk cabbage. To me, it's that first sign of spring, and it just does so much. It's everywhere, and it goes through these different phases that to me are so exciting. And you can try to replicate it in some ways. You can see the arrangement on the right, which is just like, I did that with a log and pansies and hellebore. And but I also, this infinitesimal point echoes across the seasons and through the years. So it's like Thoreau kept this calendar year after year after year, and I do the same, some of it through photos. But I want to, when I'm thinking about the last week of March, I'm also thinking about my sensations and my personal experience through all of my last weeks of March. And that's exciting to me because I love flowers so much and the outdoors. Like, what was that moment through the years? And how do I capture that? And what things might echo across the seasons? Like, can you see the milkweed on the right? And how much that form looks like the hellebore? But what is different, like the moss and all the moisture in the hellebore and the dryness and the different kind of sky on the right, and then that milkweed molting out. It's just, to me, it's a very, very rich feeling. And I'm trying to bring some of that into flower arrangements to share with that feeling that's so exciting to me with everybody else. Next slide. Okay, yeah. So again, right, lots of natural beauty through the whole year. And so in flower arranging, what I'm trying to do is capture as much of that beauty as I can and bring it indoors. It probably never is going to be like being right out there in the middle of all of that. I mean, I think Thoreau would agree with that. You just need to be right out there in it. But there are two things that a flower arrangement can do. It can, if you're really looking at all of the detail, it can bring that in. And it can condense the experience. It can direct, as the arranger, I can direct your experience through that moment in time so that what I'm seeing up in this fall, September day is that there is still green. There's also a lot of wind. You know, as the seasons are changing, there's a lot of wind. So the arrangement in the middle, well, both of them really, I'm trying to capture that feeling of the wind, not just the colors that are out there, but also there's a dryness. So you can see here, no glass containers this time of year. I mean, I'd always use ceramic. Yeah, I basically always use ceramic, maybe a basket, because I don't want to see any water. And I don't really want to see any stem this time of year. Spring is the time of stems, when you're really seeing those coming up, and there's so much stem and there's not so much leaf yet. So the middle arrangement too especially shows how I like to try to create a whole environment in flowers, so that you're getting the tree level in that outer area, and then you're getting the shrub layer, which is those hydrangea, and then you're getting the little flower garden, all not scattered throughout the arrangement, grouped as it would be in one area. So again, like you're condensing your experience out in nature into this flower arrangement. Okay. Oh, and the thought, if a garden is really about, or a garden can be about, concentrating one's experience out in nature. And if that's the case, I see the flower arrangement as a further concentration, taking those garden elements and condensing them so they can be brought indoors, and so they can direct the viewer too. Next slide. Okay, so situate yourself in time and place. Well, that's a pretty arrangement, but it's one that I would never do right now. So I'm kind of looking forward to that, but I feel like that's getting a little, I might be more like looking forward to what we saw in one of those first arrangements, more like what might be coming early April. But I'm not ready to see really around us. That is a mid-May arrangement. That's how long it takes to get to that part of the calendar. So feels off to me. But it does feel like it does sort of define, and all those flowers, yeah, I'm looking at them, all those flowers are from Concord. So, which is that exciting thing that you can start to do. But try to do all the time. I really do try to find most of my elements in nature, and if not, if it's time of year, replicate them as closely as possible with purchased flowers. But you're always thinking, what are the unique qualities of this month? That stemminess, that bright green, the quality of light. Is it cooler, warmer, lemony, golden? What's budding? Even when you're picking your vase. Okay, I typically would be using glass vase here, but I didn't here. I like the complementary color with the orange, but also, it was blue. So at least it sort of is speaking to the water element. Next slide. And distill what you see. So, January, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in January. Though a lot of what January is about is snow. And I say there's a lot going on in January, but I'm remembering Thoreau's favorite season was winter, because there actually is not as much going on as in many seasons, so you can, so it's easier to study the different elements and not overwhelm your senses. So anyway, this, is that really about January? Well, to me, I started with the idea of snow, and then I'm like, well, it's really about the texture of the snow and the shadows in the snow, and really about the stormy stirring that's going on right now, and the hard slickness of the ice. That's the reason for that leaf in the middle. So that's what I was expressing there. Next slide. Okay, so Pablo Neruda was not talking about nature in this quote, and he's not a transcendentalist, but I really do like this. You can cut all the flowers, but you cannot keep spring from coming. And I think I'm thinking about that, especially this time of year. This is really this surge of nature, the energy of nature that propels it forward. And, that sort of all-powerful nature. We can do what we want. This is, it reminds me, there's also the quote from Emerson, the earth laughs in flowers. And so that's sweet in a way. I think, though, what he may have been saying there to me is the earth laughs at us in flowers. Like, again, I'll spill all these flowers out. There's so many. That's the way I feel that quote, what it's saying to me. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. So you've all read this. And Thoreau also was talking about a broader thing than flowers, but this really resonates with me. He who would have nothing to do with thorns must never attempt to gather flowers. I mean, literally, for sure. Like as I was scrambling up our hillside to cut some white pine, I thought our white pine was going to have, I was going to be able to, in our yard, I'd be able to cut from that. No, because they lose their lower branches. So I was yesterday climbing up the hillside, and there was a multiflora rose cutting right through my jeans into my leg. So this is part of the flower experience, not just in nature. As I'm looking at my MFA friends, there is that, there is a weightiness that I feel like I see in that lady there. She is delighting in gathering those flowers in that card, but it is a heavy load. Sometimes you are conditioning those flowers, changing the water, carrying buckets. It's a lot. So you have to be someone who also, and we all know that feeling, gets a lot of energy from working with them, being with them, carrying these ideas in your head, creating that way, and enjoying each other, which I'm really reminded of looking around here. It's exciting to work with other people who get excited about flowers the same way. Yeah. Let me just make sure I've got that. Yeah. And in a way, you're going through this phase, you're facilitating an experience for yourself. That's what, there's this thrilling time when you first get your assignment. Maybe it's an assignment you've given yourself, but you're first thinking about all the ideas. There are so many things that you could do. And you're going out and you're looking at things and you're thinking, I could have expressed it that way. And then there's that harder phase where you are going here and there, buying the flowers, picking the flowers, making the phone calls to people like, what's in your garden right now, and I'm looking around seeing people who I've asked over the years for flowers from their gardens, and then you get all the flowers in front of you, and I think the thrill comes back at that point. When you're really creating, putting them together, you have your vision. That's been my experience anyway. So next slide. So I think this also relates to that feeling, the thorns, along with the, roses in the last quote, that they're also, in great flower arrangements, I think, as in great art, there's a dissonance. There is some ugliness along with the beauty. You generate energy through contrast, and that can be like textures in your flower arrangement, smooth, and it can be a lot of different things that I'll talk about. But I think there also is, to fully see the beauty, you have to have a little bit of ugly, or a little bit of something. I mean, I find it easiest to do this, or it comes up the most in art in bloom assignments, because fine art will almost always have something like this in it. So on the far right, your right, that is an art in bloom arrangement I did at the MFA. And to me, I don't know, all those colors, every color of the rainbow, I never want to do an arrangement like that. It's a big clash. It doesn't relate to what's going on in nature. But that art piece did have all those colors in it. It was kind of garish. It is, this very strong transgender woman wearing the rings, out Los Angeles in the background, and it needed that oomph that really comes from not just all beauty. That's not what life is about. And it's fun to do that. It's energizing to do that in a flower arrangement. Those center ones are just what's happening in nature. I mean, it's not always conventionally beautiful. I'd say those ferns coming up is sort of like only a mother could love. All that, the hairiness and that sort of crookedness that they have. And but I find it just a thrill to see something like that poking up through the leaves. And bring that into the flower arrangements here at First Parish, like that one on the right, just to the right of the fern. That I don't know that everybody was crazy about seeing that in March here, but it's really what was happening. And I got most of that material off my brush pile. But that's what we have in March. So certainly sometimes it's really good to recognize that, to see that. And the one on the far left may be hard to see, and I put it in kind of at the end, but it is an expression, again, of this kind of thing. Another art in bloom at the MFA, an arrangement that Joan, who's here, Joan Campbell, and I did at to go with the Degas dancer that's right in the middle of their Impressionist gallery. And, there certainly is there's certain beauty to her, that 14-year-old dancer, but also there's something a little off in her. This was dancing in Paris, end of the 19th century. Her mother was a prostitute. We don't know what she was destined for. So a little story around that is I'd done a mock-up with some quite pretty roses, and I felt like it was making the arrangement a little too pretty and sweet. And I know Joan said, when I switched to these roses, like, ooh, that's not quite as pretty. And then another friend who's quite frank said to me, said, those really look like vulvas, Ellen. So, let's also not forget that flowers are the reproductive organs of plants. And, we want to just embrace it all. Next slide. This is a quote I also think of almost every day. Say to myself, adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience. So it takes time to do this, to do any of these things. Going out in nature, making a flower arrangement, looking at a flower arrangement. The more time you take, the more it will unfold to you and the deeper experience you can have with it. So, I think perhaps the images I put up there were, I'm telling myself, have patience, don't bring on, these are the things that delight me in the spring, these very early oak leaves, the daffodils, these very early delicate things, so like that fern coming up through the leaves. Be patient for that, and then be patient and really give attention to those teeny little things that are coming up. There's a lot of energy concentrated in them. And again, as I say energy, I do want you to think that can also be God, that can also be the Spirit, that can be the Oversoul for the Transcendentalists, a lot of different things. Next slide, please. Okay. So I think this Thoreau quote really talks about my process and what he was doing metaphorically, but in some ways literally what I feel like I'm doing when he writes, how to extract its honey from the flower of the world. That is my everyday business. I'm as busy as a bee about it. I ramble over fields on that errand, and I'm never so happy as when I feel myself heavy with honey and wax. I am like a bee searching the livelong day for the sweets of nature. So I do have that feeling when I am looking at things, when I am telephoning you and asking about your gardens, when I'm walking through your gardens. So, yeah. Sorry, just a, yeah. So what you're doing is, what I'm doing is pulling in all these sensations, pulling in all these flowers, letting it stir. And it's a really, really rich feeling to be in touch with what is out there in that very moment. Next slide, please. Distill what you see. So this is a June scene. I biked by that scene on the Concord River early in the day, and there's just a lot of atmosphere. So I am trying to in these arrangements, pick up literally on what's out there. There are fields of daisies in mid-June also, but this really flowing, loose atmosphere. It's not a very ordered time of year. And also all the green. So we're finally fully flesh in green that time of year, and that comes into the flowers. Next slide. So very quickly, color theory, because Mother Nature is very attuned to the color wheel, or probably we are attuned to what Mother Nature created and became the color wheel. And this is something we really do in flower arranging is pay attention to what you're doing with color. So complementary colors, that's across the color wheel from each other, are really energizing. Next slide. They're stimulating, arresting, attention-getting, and you can see how I've used them in these flower arrangements where, there are a lot of complementary colors in the fall, like August, September, and that first slide shows them, and I've emphasized that by setting up this real burst. And in the middle arrangement, there's this kind of S-curve, which is another, like a little bit softer, more spring-like form of energy, but also a form that generates energy. The symmetrical arrangement on the right is a little calmer in its symmetry, but you do also see the crossing, sort of X shape. Their flowers are clustered as they would be in the garden, but then like a bird picked up a seed and dropped that somewhere else, you'll see that echoing on the other side of the arrangement, and it creates these horizontal lines that will add energy to an arrangement. Next slide. Analogous colors next to each other on the color wheel, and you see a lot of that in the spring. This is a beautiful slide from Cambridge School of Weston's garden that's all natives. These very cool colors in the spring, but next slide. In the fall, you can have analogous colors that are more on the warmer side of the palette. And this will make something that's more peaceful, calm, harmonious. You could actually see in the far right arrangement, there are both analogous colors, that orange and red, but there's a little subtle complementary in that too, to enliven that. There's this blue-green that's really knocked back. It's quite pale, and that adds some energy to the arrangement. Next slide. And then there's tone on tone. So that's all of the greens you see in that photograph. It's the same color used in its various states, whether that is lighter and darker, or whether that is more saturated, that it's brighter or duller. Next slide. So it creates something that is more orderly, sophisticated, clear. I just want to point out, I think, well, on the left is a January arrangement. You'll see a lot of arrangements that have this arborvitae in them. We have a big arborvitae hedge. Arborvitae is this. So I use that almost all year round. I even slip it into some summer arrangements occasionally. In the middle, again, that was a September arrangement. cosmos and zinnias in a basket, so the dryness of the basket, the casualness of the time of year expressed in that. And in the far right, that's an arrangement that Helen Stoddard did. She taught me a lot. And so it's this beautiful range of let's show all the lilac types that we have. Let's really celebrate lilac. And I love a one type of flower arrangement. And it takes some real restraint to do that. I think, which I don't often have, because I am out there seeing, oh, there's that in nature, there's that. I can use these things to express something different. But Helen and my mother was very good at this too. She would pick one or two things. And you really, in the winter, I remember her doing for a party something that was just maidenhair fern and alstroemeria, just sort of supermarket alstroemeria, but all white. All the leaves off the alstroemeria, maidenhair fern. And it was gorgeous, gorgeous. And so, yeah, restraint. You can also see in the lilac, those leaves, those sort of yellow-green leaves, those are Andromeda leaves. So another thing you can do with the fresh Andromeda leaves that have come off, lilac leaves, so often the thing to do is to strip the leaves totally off the flower that you're using. Then all the water goes to the flower, for one thing. You're not losing it to the leaves. But often those leaves they just don't work as well. They just are not expressing what you want to express. Maybe you want to use a hosta leaf to be clearer with that leaf form. But these Andromeda leaves, they hold up very well, unlike lilac leaves. Next slide. Okay, so use your flowers to deepen and connect with your spirit. Use time and place to elicit emotion and deepen. And I put this in part so that you can see I will most often start with a little sketch. And that lets me work things out. I'll be thinking, what time of year, what am I expressing? And so the sketch on the left became this sort of secondary arrangement for a memorial service that was kind of down at this level. And I just wanted it to be spring, so I got there, not flowers, but plants. That's maidenhair fern plant, hellebore plant, and hyacinth plant. And then I put little spice jars in between and put, those are paper whites in between. So you can use whole plants in your arrangements too. Next slide. Design with intent. What are you trying to get across? This was at that same memorial service, and I wanted spring freshness and a feeling of an environment here that was restful and supportive and peaceful, but a little mournful. And that's why I picked those long French tulips that would go kind of up and over and down. You can see in the center picture, sometimes I just I wish I could just scoop up all these flowers and use them as is. They're so beautiful on my kitchen floor. That's what that batch is. Next slide. So this was also a memorial service here at First Parish, and it was in the middle of June, though, so which is also when, I know we don't all love vetch, but in the lower left, that's what was going on out in the fields. Every single one of these flowers came from Concord. There was a little pivot that I did. I was planning to use Solomon seal, and it just came and went a little faster than I thought it would. And so, again, that is actually, but the year was having, I was like, I would have never thought, that's Lakothaway, dog hobble. And I never noticed much the bloom on dog hobble, but it was having a very good year. And I think it just is, that's a very big arrangement. It's right here. So they were, Lakothaway, how broad it reaches. And I wanted that a little bit mournful, a little bit embracing. I think a lot of mileage out of that dog hobble, and wonderful to be able to celebrate the time that it was blooming, really to notice, oh, what is there? I had never noticed such an abundant bloom and how much a part of the bloom on the Kothaway there was. So it was a chance for me to enjoy that and then to share it with a big group right here. Again, like a garden, the tallest, the foxglove there was sort of waving above things. The daisies are dancing through. I'm using, again, analogous colors for this sort of wanting to have a calm and peaceful feeling. But of course, that's what early June lends itself to also. That's what was out there. And to find some specialness. I mean, you can see if you can see in the upper left, I had never seen, I know there was Siberian iris out there. It's like, well, those are ordinary to me, and it's a little bit darker a purple than I want. And this is what I'm fortunate to be able to do in Concord, is to look around some gardens and see this special paler iris. And oh, there's one other thing I wanted to point out is there's Amsonia in here, which I never really thought of that much at this time of year. It's, it makes that great, bright yellow leaf in the fall, but it does have a light blue bloom. It's a little tiny bloom on the left. So again, that's a cluster. That's a lot of Amsonia blossoms all together. To celebrate it, to honor it, to bring your attention to it so people who might not have seen what an Amsonia looks like have a chance to see it. And then you'll see it on the other side, kind of dancing across the arrangement, creating this energy through the arrangement. And I always like to get some density really toward the center. And often we'll do that with a peony or with a piece of hydrangea. And then very dense at the center, really breaking the rim of the vessel to the vase. You never want a straight line across the top of your vessel, for a lot of reasons, I think. But one is you don't see straight lines in nature. You just don't go out, and so you do not want to bring that into this when you're trying to create natural flow. So there are things coming up and down. Maybe I'll pause for a second to say how you do that. You often can do that by putting a chicken wire pillow, creating a ball of chicken wire, and letting that sit on top of your vase. So then you can guide something kind of up and over. There's a point, you want 2 points for stability. So you're putting it through the top bit of chicken wire and down through the lower bit. So you can kind of make it curve that way. You can also, after practice especially, most stems with the heat of your hands and massage can be convinced to curve some. So that too. Oh, I see Joan. I remember Joan also taping a penny to the underside of a hosta leaf so that it would drape over. So you can do all kinds of tricks like that. All in the service of making things look like they do out in nature, of course, not fooling them that much. Okay, next slide. All right. We say here at First Parish, engage us deeply in this life of ours, this sacred, essential moment now. So, as you can see, that's a lot of what this talk is about, ways of connecting to the moment where you can feel the most grounded and rooted and connected to each other, I think, too, not just the natural world. So in this section, we're going to go month by month. I have 4 slides for January. Don't worry, I do not have 4 slides for any other month, but but we'll go month by month so you can get a feel for how the world around us unfolds and how that is interpreted or concentrated in flower arranging. All right, so next slide. So I'm going to talk, and I have some MFA friends here. I'm going to talk a little bit about this arrangement that I did where when we work on flowers, there are about 20 flower arrangers at the MFA. And we do the week flowers that are there every week and last for a week. So So you are on a team with about 5 people, and take turns being captain and designing the group of 4 arrangements, and then the whole team together one morning. One morning comes in and conditions the flowers, the next morning does the arrangements, all in that window before the museum opens from 7 to 10 in the morning. So this shows how an arrangement came together, but it also shows like a different take on January, but that still is expressing that time. So what I want to express was this feeling of snow and shadows on the snow, which I saw here at Great Brook, which is that photo on the left, and then I began to see in paintings, as in the middle, where there are these purplish shadows, and then I began to recognize those, and then the wonderful costume sergeant exhibit was going on, and I was like, oh, look at those colors in her dress and that sash. And then we went to Spain because our daughter was there for her junior year, and we saw all of these beautiful, like that water bottle with that violet color on it, and the potato chip bag with that stunning color on it. And then we went to the Sorolla Museum, and we saw his wife and daughters all splayed out over the green grass, and the beautiful colors of their dresses, and how wonderful chartreuse is with the purple. And so, yeah, maybe getting a little bit further from snow, but that was definitely the grounding point, and I didn't want to totally lose that. And, and then I'm looking at other flower arrangements too. Both of those are by Max Gill, who is someone that I follow, and I'll give you a list of people that I look at the end. But I saw what he was doing with greens and purples, and that I could see how that related to, well, the snow and the Sorolla that I'd seen, and all that. So next slide. Then I'm taking all that inspiration, looking at, on the upper left, whether I was going to go with something more whitish and kind of in the middle, whether it would be more purpley, water testing vases, doing some drawings of what the arrangement might look like, taking photos at the flower exchange of possible flowers that might express these things. That on the right is actually a picture of a bit of the flower exchange behind those sticks. I knew I wanted January, I knew I wanted sticks in the arrangement. So the flower exchange is where at the MFA we get all our flowers, and I have occasionally done that for First Parish here. It's a big warehouse down by the airport that has just like everything you could imagine. And it does change through the years. It does, it is affected by the seasonality and the what is available, but a lot is available to them. So some of that seasonality is also what is in people's imagination, what they want to see at certain times of year, which does relate to kind of what I'm saying here. They get some of their flowers locally. The Cups, who live in Concord and grow out in Littleton, provide a lot of dahlias to the flower exchange. But many of their flowers are grown, as I think maybe most flowers in the world even, are grown in Central America. And then they are flown to the Netherlands, where there is a big exchange there, so that because flowers are, a rose is not a rose is not a rose, there's quality, people have to look at those. Then there are buyers there. Winston Flowers has their own buyer there. That's why they can do something that's different from anybody else here. And then they're shipped to here. So I use them, but I use them, I think in that whole equation, I'm like, how many people are going to see these flowers? How many people are going to get joy out of this? That can make it worthwhile to use a little more of something like that in your expression. But again, I really try to use mostly flowers that I find right here in Concord. Next slide. So that shows, it's a finished central, sort of the core arrangement, I'd say, is at the bottom. right on top of that, though, is my sketch, which I like to do often if I'm worried about something, especially as a collage. Actually take pictures of the flowers that I think I'm going to be using and make a collage. I mean, I have a design art background, so that comes naturally to me, but it helps me. And in the center, and that is me in the flower room at the MFA. That's what that room looks like. I'm loading up 4 carts for these 4 different arrangements that are there. So as captain, you're controlling the design, and you're providing the flowers, but then you're handing off your design. I'll show you in the not the next slide, Akari, but I'll show you how that works. But notice how in this one, okay, it's pretty far from snow, right? But I was also taking into account, boy, it's in this space that has all this white. So maybe this is really about the shadows themselves in the snow. And again, generating energy, I mean, that maybe is the weather, but it also is, as I say energy, I'm also saying the soul, God, the spirit. What kind of energy can I give people when they view this? What kind of sense of being transported or having a transcendent experience even can I give a viewer? So energy comes from, there's sort of a crisscross there of the lines of flowers, of the branching. I was thrilled to find that clematis, even though it was January, and I would not do that here. But I was pretty excited about sort of the tumble that I could get there, which reminded me of the Soroya sisters and kind of snow falling down and the fresh green of its leaves. I had no idea if it would last. I had sort of some backup ideas, and it did. It lasted looking like that the whole week. So, but can you see how that is down at the bottom, but it's also picked up at the top? So as the eye travels through an arrangement, you build energy that way too. In the middle of the center pictures, can you see those leaves and that I'm folding a leaf back? So I like to do that too, manipulate a leaf, those big tea leaves or aspergillus leaves they're called. That there allowed me to get a totally different texture so that the ranunculus that are that deep purple up at the top could relate to that big tea leaf, and you're having a little conversation there, and the tea leaf has a very slick surface like the ice, but it's not the color of the ice, and the folds in the tulip felt like the folds of the snow. I think, and then I was again like, it's all analogous color. I feel like it needs just a little warm up, and then that's why I bought. You see there's a sort of peach color ranunculus there, and imagine the arrangement without that ranunculus. I mean, it's still nice, but I think that it just needed that touch, just a touch of warmth. Maybe this sort of promise of what is to come, or just not being too chilly. And look how I obscure the lip of this vase, right? And basically what I want to do, since I like nature and flowers so much, generally is kind of to get rid of the vase if I can. And again, to try to create some feeling of magic so that if I can, again, for energy, for spirit, so if I can make the arrangement feel like it's kind of floating there, that can add that feeling of and maybe it's a little bit ill at ease even, what's holding that up? There's energy in that too. Next slide. So this is how those are to the left of the bigger picture. That's what I would give to the other arrangers working on this, because I can only be at the one we just saw, putting it together. With Janie, who's here helping me, we only have about an hour and a half, maybe two, to do that. So one person could never go from one to the next. So there are other people on your team, and that's exciting and wonderful too, is working with somebody, giving them your drawing, giving them the flowers you have in mind, and seeing what comes to them too. And the design had, again, that cluster. I really do believe in having a cluster at the rim of a vase like that, and then having the energy disperse as it goes out into the environment. I think that helps like spread the energy out into the environment when you have this sort of tight thing that's dispersed, and then you feel like it's going on from there. Both of them, again, like January, so sticks and pussy willow, and I think it was, yeah, so Robin added in that, I think I had curly willow on her card, but I think having that curly willow there really helps there. Seeing different types, different textures of the same color, different, so the chrysanthemum at the base is, then there are these mini sort of palms of the same color, and that's what you're looking for too, this sort of repetition. Think about where your arrangement is going as well. So the one we just looked at on the left is the Huntington entrance. There's a formality to that space, so there's a bit of a formality to the arrangement as well. And then when you go into the one on the right, that is in the Shapiro courtyard, that big space. So I think we're all doing everything we can to pump as much energy into those arrangements as we can get to send it out into that space. But it's also the space that has that big lime green chihuly in it. So see how there is actually yellow twig dogwood in that arrangement, and there is, I don't remember what that green foliage is, but that yellow twig dogwood, I mean, that is, at least it's out here in the snowy days. It's not a native, but it is out here, and it creates that relationship and bring in more white for sparkle in that area, but also the snow, and then those darker purple verticals are actually the tea leaf bent the other direction, in the long direction. So there's a little tie, so that's, you have these leaves, and you can either loop them back, or you can roll them. There are lots of different things that you can do, and you need something that size for that space. I mean, the vase is like this, probably the whole thing, something like that. It's big. And that scarf arrangement is like, sitting on the ground. It's like that size. So next slide. Okay, so now we're into February, back at First Parish, back in Concord. And outdoors, there are a lot of sticks and branches, a lot of evergreen, scale. There are many sort of more trees. They're not the little tiny shoots yet. There's a snowy chill, but there's a little bit of a warming light by February. So, often it's tone on tone, or whites, mainly whites and some greens. But I think, you can do an arrangement that has a coolish yellow like those lilies in it, and it will still feel like, and in fact kind of celebrate this by mid-February. I don't know about you all, but I am just around President's Day getting really excited about how much more light we have, and how you're beginning to feel a little intensity of that light. So that's what I'm thinking about when I'm doing something like that. You can see long sticks in virtually all of these. The one on the lower left is an art in bloom, so there you can still see, every one of these has my arborvitae in it. It's such, because we have a hedge. Once you have a hedge, you've got a ready source of greens. And it's just, anyway, it really works for winter. On the lower left, just to note the purplish plant at the bottom, that's a house plant that I bought the house plant, rinsed off the soil, and put it in the arrangement. And on the left side, I don't know if you can see kind of sticking down, that's a paper white narcissus that I just wired onto a stick and put in the arrangement. Just coming out, not in bloom yet. Those are, even though those are all purchase flowers, they virtually all are flowers that come in the spring, so they don't feel so far off in a winter arrangement, I mean, except for, I just love, and so you'll see a lot, I love this green mist, this Queen Anne's lace, false Queen Anne's lace. It's so atmospheric. It felt very snowy there. I mean, here again, you can see how I'm not spreading the flowers throughout the arrangement. I'm clustering them to direct the viewer because I want them to look and really understand the characteristics of that particular flower. I really want, boy, white daffodils, let's see them every way. Let's not miss them in this arrangement. Yeah. So next slide. Okay, so March, we're getting closer to spring. So, and things are happening, like the pussy willow catkins are even beginning to sort of bud, flower, and you can force things like the forsythia. It will force really easily in March, and I think that's totally fine to do. I also think by March, it's okay if you want to get a little ahead of yourself and play with some spring flowers, as is shown on the right, as long as you don't do it too far off from the way things are appearing. I mean, you can see in that vibrant spring flower arrangement, there are a lot of sticks, a lot of bare branches in that arrangement. So both, there is a branch that I've forced some teeny little green leaves off of. I mean, that wouldn't happen out there for another month, but I think it's okay to anticipate about that much. Yeah, so those seem characteristic of March. Next slide. Okay. In April, flowers actually start to emerge. And I mean, we're here in New England, right? Not till the end of the month. No, some, like you'll see the scilla earlier on, and that is just so gorgeous. That is on the Orchard House lawn. It's beautiful. And so, this is when things start to accelerate. So keep your eyes open or you're going to miss out. Things day by day, I mean, certainly week by week. I think this is a very good time to start considering going to Mount Auburn, where they have so many different trees and shrubs and bulbs and perennials, and they're doing more and more with natives. And I really encourage you to go there to look at their horticulture. It's just amazing, and it will be a different show each week until things start to hover a little bit in July. And but spring's such a thrill, because if you look, it's just such a show. So you're doing things in your arrangements this month with things that are moist and cool, earthy and natural, branching. There's a lot of moss out there. Like I use this green tick a lot. It's a dianthus, like a carnation, but it looks like moss. So use it like moss. Don't use it up here. Use it like this. Because even right now, and so I have a little bit of it in this arrangement, if I dig under the snow, there is some real green in that moss in our yard. Yeah. Oh, and I do want to say, so that the middle arrangement with the daffodils, Barbara Wheeler did that arrangement. She was certainly a mentor of mine here in the beginning at First Parish, and what she did there is so beautiful. She would say, leave room for the butterflies to fly through. I mean, I think that is all year something to think about, giving flowers their space, letting, again, the spirit wind its way through your arrangement. But it's especially important in the spring when you look outside, there is space between. That's part of the beauty of spring. And you can see that in her, to have a branch that's leafing out with andromeda and daffodils below. It's just lovely. I think those are apple blossoms or apple branches. Next slide. In early May, I did do May in two parts because there's so much going on in May. In early May, these two arrangements on the left are both art in bloom, so they were driven, their palette was driven by the piece of art that I was working from, but the one on the left is actually almost all my own flowers. I did add the delphinium in the middle, but it was important to me to pick something that was very light colored, to be sort of like the sky, the color of the sky, which is not that September darker purple. I'm looking at the time, Shelley. I'll move along faster. Okay. Yeah, next slide. And we begin to have a real abundance of flowers later in May. Again, they're very wet, that you can find all kinds of things, the spirea bridal veil. It's just very fresh time of year. Next slide. In June, things start to simmer down a little bit. There's tons of beauty at the beginning with the peonies. There's tons of beauty at the end, those fields of daisies. And you just want to hold on to that look as you put them into things. The daisies with the lady's mantle that's out are so beautiful. Again, in that little arrangement in the center, combining hosta leaves with the arrangement. On the right, that was a memorial service in New Hampshire, so I brought back in the arborvitae again, and the birch log, and the deeper blue. Next slide. In July, we can all begin to take a little rest. Things don't change that much in July, so you can just be with what is. You can be a little more relaxed in your flower arranging. In fact, I think the big challenge in July is not losing what is happening, what you see in the upper middle slide, like that basket full of flowers that I've just gathered from a garden. I was quite worried about how I was going to make it look as good in the arrangement, which is the one at the bottom, just below it, because things just look, Mother Nature provides in summer. Next slide. Okay, in August, you can relax. You can relax. There are lots of flowers out there. It is, it's a time. Again, up on the upper right, I just want to point out, that's Mount Auburn. That's goldenrod, and it's mountain mint below it, all natives. So much to see there. And the hydrangeas right here at First Parish. And Mother Nature's giving you a lot of hot colors and a big palette to work with. But she's also giving you some whites and greens. So I would normally say, don't do things with every color of the rainbow. Think about controlling your color in your arrangements. But in August and September, there's such a strong light, and the color of the sky is so strong that and Mother Nature knows, she provides all the colors of the rainbow. Just think about doing things like she does, though, by carrying some white in your arrangement to tone that down, by keeping your levels of saturation, the brightness about the same, some kind of order. Next slide. Amazing, exciting things going on in September. Everything is getting so huge, and the complementary colors and just the vibrance and abundance of that time. And you can do things like that arrangement on the right that is just so huge. And I always get excited, and this comes up at any time of the year, when you see the center of a flower relating to the other part of another, bits of flowers relating to each other, and Mother Nature throwing that out there for you, not being something that you have to kind of figure out. Next slide. So here again are these bright colors of an abundance of September, but see how they're a little bit toned down by, I've included white or a lot of green in all of these arrangements. So next slide. So I'm going to quickly go through this one, just that it was, again, I was captain, and I was very excited to do a meadow, and a meadow without a lot of flowers in it, just a very grassy meadow, and how would I do that with textures? And that week, John Bach said, we have this emerald. We really want to promote this emerald. I was like, oh, emerald, that's the color of May. What am I going to do? So I decided, well, I could do maybe the complementary color of the emerald, so to kind of maybe something like that. And I can do the look of a gem, see the eringium on that upper right and the scabiosipods on the lower right. Those are sort of like facets of a gem, something like that. And oh, and it's very big. So I'll do something very big. And so that, next slide, translated into that. So huge, right? And again, that sort of wanted to get that magic of floating there so that people would wonder and maybe be excited by that. And using the complementary color of the gem, using some natives, that is 9 bark, stretching out that dark. I mean, we have, I guess here I have abandoned that sort of tan throughout idea, but this is almost a tone-on-tone arrangement from that deep purple to that sort of pink to the, or analogous color maybe, to the white. Again, really clustering like flowers. See the scabiosipods on the upper right, and just a hint of the complementary in that hellebore. Next slide, please. And then this is what Laura did at in the Shapiro Courtyard. That celosia in the middle, I really wanted to get something in there that was growing here in that season, that celosia. And several of them clustered together, several of the callas clustered together, again, for impact and to make sure the viewer is really understanding that particular flower. Next slide. And then in October, we are all racing. I mean, I am, to do as much as we can before the frost. That's dahlia time. Looking at the lower left is Rebecca. She's here right in front of me. Her garden at that a few of us know at the town gardens, full of dahlias. And certainly that arrangement above is from that garden. But I was so much to choose from among dahlias, I could relate it to the quilt that was hung in First Parish just by picking that color palette, the type of dahlia, and then using, those are asters surrounding the dahlias, but I'm really just using them for their greens there, not for the color of the flower at all. And the hosta leaves continue. I like the scale and the boldness of the hosta leaves with the dahlia leaves. The dahlia leaves are really not right for them at all. They don't look great. So hosta leaves sub in, and they're on exactly the same schedule. When the dahlias have had enough, the hostas have had enough at the same moment. So, and I can say sometimes we go to some lengths to do this. The dahlias, that's my mother's garden in Cohasset, right up center, and her dahlias, and you can see, she's like, there were other flowers in this garden, but it's sort of like one thing. She had a great sense of restraint. And so those, she called me and said, I think they're gonna have a frost tomorrow. Do you want my dahlias? I'll drive them up. We can meet in the MFA parking lot. And I'm like, yes, I'll go. Anna's at school. I'll go, I'll meet you. So they became that arrangement right here at First Parish. Analogous colors, everything, nothing. But I did, again, I used asters for their green. Can you imagine that arrangement without that green on the right? It just was a little flat, and I needed a little darkness. You don't see asters, but you're seeing the dark green of the leaf. Next slide. And again, just this sense of like swirling energy, what's available in October, bringing in the atmosphere, bringing in the palette, bringing in fall. I would never use fruit in an arrangement in the winter, but fall, absolutely. I mean, if you can put an apple or a pear or something like that in an arrangement, berries, that's what's out there. And next slide. And November, I mean, I think you could probably sink deeply into what's going on actually in November, but I don't know, I'm still called to do something to extend the feeling of the fall. And, on the left is a bunch of arrangements I did for an Ed Fund dinner. There were 25 of those for sort of the teacher aspect of it and for where we were in fall. I wanted to base it around the apple. The roses I picked to be sort of and the Alstroemeria are both distillations of the apple color. And then when we got to the site, I added on the branching. And on the right here at First Parish, what I was taught to do by the last head of the flower committee is press whole branches of leaves. We harvest them when the leaf really has its color in the first half of October, and then you put them under appliance boxes up in your attic, like appliance box, newspaper, leaves, newspaper, appliance box, on up. Then put cement blocks on top, or a bookcase full of books, or all your book boxes, anything heavy. And when you lift all that off, they'll be totally flat, and they will hold their color. So that's what we do to keep that going through Thanksgiving. Next slide. So December starts to have a little bit quieter palette, but it does have the excitement of a lot of greens, some of these reds. I think here at First Parish, we try to bring it directly into the sanctuary, and those are beautiful white pine saplings. We have white pines all over Concord, and bringing those in, and some wonderful, wonderful winterberry. It's just says so much with so little. There's a lot of restraint there. But you can also, for a party in the middle, do flowers from other places, other times. But think about what's going on outside. So again, that Queen Anne's lace and that whatever that fluffy blue-green thing is, I think is very much like that ice. And the green tones are still like the white pine. And I was looking for something. I was very happy that that it was that flower that would be just that red, just that orangey red of the berries. So I still want to create a relationship to what's going on outside. Next slide. Oh yeah, so here is the start of what I'm doing here. So I was at Great Brook. I was thinking about how do I get some snow? How do I, get that bluish sky? How do I use some things from outside? But this is a little bit special. Let's bring in some more things. And I think let's just go past this and just add some things to this arrangement together. And then next slide, Arkady. And then you can see these are the people that I really most look at and the places that I gather flowers from the most. And but let's so I think what I was doing here first was first picking a vase so it can clear. I wanted to see some stem. I wanted to have some water. I wanted to have some iciness and water because of where we are in the year. I wanted to be creating an environment. So I was looking at what kind of stick can I bring in. Can I bring in multiple things? Because it's so much stick this time of year. It's trees. It's, pussy willow. Maybe it's beginning to make these catkins. I don't know, but I could write. Not quite, but we're getting there. White pine and arborvitae. So, and then I'm like, yes, whites of snow. But I'm ready to get a little bit of a green. Green is kind of a neutral in flower arranging. So let's build a relationship with some different things that have the same color but different forms. And let's start to cluster them. And I'm like, so I'm just going to do a little bit of this. But I think we could build this up to be more powerful than it is right now. I have no mechanics in this at all because I have so much stuff in it that it's holding itself up. In fact, there's so much stuff. Let's see if this will slide down here. Yeah. So when I walked in, I thought, there's not quite enough impact when you're walking into the church, which is, again, I would sort of want that surprise. I want people to be arrested a bit so they'll pay attention. And then let's see. I want the weight down there, so I'm not sure about this up here, but I do want like an echo, maybe, somewhere. Maybe. And yeah, we have extra delphinium, so why not? And yeah. Oh, so I don't often do this at First Parish. We do a lot at MFA. I extended this stem just with a stick so that it could, you just have to make sure that this, the actual stem is below the water when you're doing something like that. I think for the sake of time, I'll take questions as I'm doing this. I'll try to do that. If you, I think Shelley might have a mic that she wants. How's that suit you, Shelley? And Arkady, could you?
I can take
or
questions
Victor?
in the sanctuary, and then Shelley may have some questions coming in from our Zoom viewers on the
Super.
chat.
And Arkady, if you could switch over from the slide view to our Zoom, for our Zoom viewers to me so they can see the arrangement.
Okay, we have a question. Please wait for the mic so the Zoom viewers can hear your question.
Thanks, Victor. When you go into nature, do you go on our trails, or is all of it privately owned?
Oh yeah, I mean in terms of like cutting, taking things or getting, so I get my inspiration. I love, you know, I saw that little fern on the Spencer Brook land of the Concord Land Trust. And so I am mostly walking around our woods and, you know, the woods of Carlisle and Lincoln also. That's where I'm getting my ideas, in nature, in where things actually are springing up naturally. Then I'm thinking, how will that translate? And that's when I might be taking some of those things. That's from people's yards, mine, you know, or gardens. But yeah. Does that answer that? Oh no, I don't take it. I don't cut it from the public trails.
Thank you, Ellen. So, do you have like a routine when you go out in nature? Do you like go out every day? How do you decide where you're going to go?
Okay, so what Deb is asking is, do I have a routine of going out in nature? No, I really love it. I know it will make me feel better, more connected. So I'd say I do it regularly. How do I decide where to go? I think back over all my experiences, sort of, in these different places and think about what calls me and where my friend wants to go. But sometimes it's a good idea to go on your own or to go with a friend who doesn't mind going quietly so that you can really focus on what you're seeing. So I'm a little bit just trying to expand this arrangement to make it more impactful from afar, and because I have the materials. And but boy, isn't this, I just love this all year long, this Queen Anne's lace. Because it's, can you see, it's like the hydrangea, but it's a different form. It's like the tulip, but it's just a different texture. Yeah. Any suggestions? Anything you're seeing back there? We certainly need another tulip. At least we have 4 tulips. I mean, generally want to have odd numbers in a flower arrangement, even something like this. Not always, but. And so I'm thinking maybe a little echo on this side. I don't know. But, you know, group like together like this, be able to look through some things at your flowers like you would in nature. Show them in their different aspects, from the front, from the side. I don't know. All right. Is it bothering you that they're just 4 delphinium there? Okay. Yeah, glad. So what I would normally do here, too, is step back a lot, and boy, this one is so bulky. So we'll see if it's too much in the middle or not. This is going to be, I don't know if we have snow tomorrow. We think we might have a Zoom service, and I wonder if Jennifer will deliver it from here, in which case it'd be nice to have something nice and tall like this. Yeah. This is something I really, yeah.
Ellen, when you are doing arrangements for this sanctuary, do you do your arranging here in the sanctuary as you're doing now, or do you do them in the flower room and then bring them out here?
I almost always do my arranging on site, in location. So if I'm doing an arrangement for there, I do it there. So that then I can come down and see, it looks different when you're looking from below. It looks different and depending on what's in the background. Really, the background becomes part of your arrangement, like I was saying about the visitor center at the MFA. So I kind of wish I had this staked, so I might be able to do something like this. Let's just balance it there for the moment. I'll come back and fix that. And yeah, I'd like to kind of use all my flowers. So I'm not going to do that, though, because I think we're all ready for some tea. And I'm really relieved to be at this point, but very, very happy and grateful to you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Okay. So, yeah, thank you for hanging in there with me, and let's leave this behind and just head downstairs, and I'll catch up with you there. No mechanics in that because I knew I was going to have a lot of flowers to fit in there. So I put in the sticks first to kind of make a crisscross. And then I was sort of watching as I put in my first other elements, like where